Okay everybody, so we're going to be doing our scratch art project this couple of weeks here. And before we do the scratch art project, I just want to say that if you did not have a chance to get the scratch board, you're still able to go to the Academy office and get that. But if you don't have a scratch board, you can just do this on a piece of paper with pen, marker, or something like that too. So don't feel like you can't do this project just because you don't have the special material. But I highly encourage you to go get some of that scratch board because it's really fun to work with. Okay, so before we talk about the scratch board, we have to talk about the technique that we're going to be using for our scratch board, and that technique is called cross-hatching. Okay, so cross-hatching is going to be how we do value in a material that is not pencil or charcoal or crayon, because in pencil, if you want to do a transition of value from dark to light, all you have to do is color with your pencil and just push harder on your pencil as you go. But you can't really do that with pen or marker, things like that. It's kind of not possible because the material just comes out in the same value all the time. So in order for us to be able to do a transition of value with something like a pen, or when we get to our scratch art, you know, with the tool that we're going to be using for our scratch art, you kind of have to know what cross-hatching is, be able to kind of practice. Now this is going to be a really important tool that we're going to use in this project, but it's a really fun thing to experiment with, and you're going to see a lot of cross-hatching out in the world. So if you look at things like comic books, you're going to see that they use different ways to incorporate cross-hatching for value. A lot of the manga, comic, cartoons, a lot of times you use cross-hatching. So it's a really interesting technique for shading. So let's practice some cross-hatching. So first of all, you're making hatch marks, which are just kind of straight lines like this. And then technically cross-hatching is when you go across them with more lines like that, okay? So depending on how close together your lines are, how many overlaps you do, you could even do more overlaps in all kinds of different angles. The darker and darker your value is going to get, okay? Now some people do cross-hatching as just kind of scribbly little things like this. Some people just do lines. Some people do cross-hatching as little, you know, just little marks. So with pen, it's totally possible to get a transition. Okay, so let's do one of our familiar objects that we know, which is our cone. So remember the cone, the values are going to be triangle shaped. They're going to be skinny up here at the tip, and they're going to get wider as they come towards the bottom. So if I'm going to do my cone, I'm going to do my hatching marks to kind of match the shape or the form of that object. So I'm going to kind of start by going across the cone with these kind of rounded marks like that. And then I'm going to put them closer together as I get into the midtones and the darker tones. And then as I get into the really dark areas, I'm going to start crisscrossing my lines and cross-hatching. Okay. Okay, so you see here that I've got dark to light in something like a pen. Now I can do this, the same exact kind of a thing with marker. This is a pretty thick marker, but it's, you know, it's the same exact concept where I'm just making some lines and I'm spreading the lines out further apart where it needs to be a lighter value, and then I put them closer together where they need to be a darker value. And I'm not necessarily just coloring in half of this cone. I'm putting marks in between where it's very dark and where it's very light, trying to get that transition of value. Okay, so something like that. So it's not an exact science, as you can see, you know, maybe my cross-hatching isn't completely perfect, but you get the idea that I'm going for here. So this is going to be how we're going to add detail to our scratch board. So let's talk about our scratch board, okay? Now, This is going to be a 2-week project, so you are not going to need to finish this week. So we're just going to talk about how we're going to start our design and how to work with the scratch board, because we're going to have sort of a couple of days to work with this, okay? So with our scratch board, it's a pretty thick piece of paper. It's got the white background and it's got the black top to it, and the black top is the side you work on. Because what you're going to end up doing, and you can see I've already done this up here in the corners, you're going to take a toothpick or something and you're going to scratch away, and it kind of takes some practice. You might want a slightly sharper toothpick than I have here, but you're going to scratch away and reveal the super shiny metallic surface that's underneath that black stuff, okay? So when you're thinking about your design for this project, you are going to be scratching away where it's lighter. So you're going to be putting light value in where you scratch away. So you want to be thinking about this as kind of being maybe a little bit backwards. Usually we're putting marks in where we want to make something darker, but in this instance, we're putting marks in where we want to make something lighter, okay? So how do you design this? Well, Scratchboard is not the most forgiving thing, because if I take my pencil and I start drawing pencil on this, I may not be able to erase away my lines. So you want to be really sure about kind of what your layout's gonna look like before you start scratching or even drawing with your pencil. And if you are gonna draw with your pencil first, make sure you're in the sketch position, holding it in the middle of the pencil so you don't put so much pressure on the end, and sketch very, very lightly. So if I want to make, say, a landscape with a moon or something, I can put my object down and draw my line around the outside, and I can feel I actually did scratch away in a couple of areas there, you can see. But if I need to fix something, I can still erase, but I have to do it really, really, really lightly. And you can see that when I erase, you can see where that happened. So you want to try to make something that you may not need to do a super crazy drawing, that you're going to need to erase a lot. So try to think of a design that's something that you can draw just straight on there. Now, pencil seems to be a pretty awesome material for this, because I got it to scratch away a little bit, but you might experiment with different objects. You know, you might want to have a blade of some kind, you know, a blunt tip of something. I will experiment with a bunch of different things and tell you what I find is best. But I like to start with toothpick because it's kind of something that, you know, takes some work to get it to scratch off, just in case you make a mistake. Okay, so, you know, I'll start scratching in my design. Of course, I want to design the rest of it first. So, you know, if I wanted to do some mountains, you know, I might draw my mountains. And anytime that I draw mountains, everybody, they're not witch hats, straight up and down lines. Mountains have rocks and lots of little things going on with them, lots of little twists and turns. So I like to make, you know, kind of some rocky looking shapes instead of something like, you know, the witch hat mountains. But that's just me, that's what I like to do. And then once I'm ready to start scratching away, I can, you know, follow the lines I made with my pencil, kind of get it in there. After a lot of experimentation, I have actually discovered that just a regular old paper clip, the edge of this, is going to be a perfect tool. I also had some success with the end of this little nail clipper thing, but it's actually working really well with this material to do the metal paper clip. So, you know, when we're an artist, we have to experiment. You know, sometimes you make assumptions about something, like I assumed, because I've done scratch art before, that they usually come with a wooden stylus, that the toothpick was going to be the best option for me, but today it was not. So it's a good example of how, you know, when we're making art, we can experiment and find things that really work. We just have to think outside of the box sometimes. But it does seem like something that's sharp and metal is a little bit better than something that is wood for this project. Now, we probably won't get to scratching on the first day of this project anyway, so you'll have a lot of time to kind of plan out your design, and you'll have some time to go pick up the scratch board if you didn't have a chance to. What I did was I actually cut my scratch board in half, so I'm working on a half sheet. That's a good option if you want to try experimenting with it, or if you just, really enjoy it and you want to make more than one artwork. So now that I kind of have my general layout though, now what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to make some cool lines that show the moon shining in the background, and then I'm going to put some more hatching marks to show some more texture and some more value in my mountains as well. I'm going to do something different now. This one I'm not going to do a landscape, I'm going to do a feather. So I like the idea of a feather because it's pretty easy to do this with just scratching, and you're not really needing to do too much pencil work. So with a feather, you have that center spine kind of thing. And I'm going to make my feather not a straight feather. I'm going to kind of curve it a little bit like that for the center spine. And then I'm going to work to thicken up one end significantly thicker than the other. And I'm going to scratch away a whole lot of that center line. Okay, so now I'm going to go through and I'm going to make the feathers coming off of the center. Okay, so I'm not going to make these straight either, and I'm going to kind of do a few guide marks to kind of show how I'm going to have this shaped. These are just going to guide me as I go through and put all of the detail in. Okay, so you can see that I went back through and I added, a lot more lines closer to this spine. I really worked on getting that center spine really cleared off, and then trying to make some of these, these outer marks about the same length kind of gives that idea of a feather. But there's another option for you. Of course, you can do your own design. Just a couple of different ideas for this scratch art project. So hatching marks, getting a tool that you find success with, and then maybe split your scratchboard in two. Okay. All right, so we're going to talk about all of this during class. So remember, you don't need to work on this until you talk to me in class about this. All right. Great job, everybody.